Welcome. My name is Matthew Phoenix, and I'll give a more thorough introduction in a moment, but we are grateful to have you join us on September 17th for the fourth public workshop related to the Kauai Subbasin Water Marketing Strategy. We had earlier a first public workshop in October 2021, a second in October 2022, the third in May 2023, and now the fourth and likely the last public workshop related to this initiative. Before going any further, I want to pass it off to Amelia to talk about interpreting.
Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Tendremos interpretación simultánea disponible para la junta de hoy. Si usted gusta acceder a la interpretación, nuestras dos intérpretes, Catherine y también Tania, están listos para ayudarles. Para poder acceder a la interpretación, si usted está utilizando una computadora, buscará el icono de un mundo que aparece en la parte inferior de su pantalla. De ahí usted seleccionará donde dice Español y los invitamos también a silenciar el audio original. Si usted está utilizando un teléfono o una tableta, su proceso se mirará un poco diferente. Buscarán los 3 puntos en la pantalla que digan More o Más en español. Deslizarán arriba en el menú de opciones hacia donde dice Interpretación. De ahí seleccionarán donde dice Español. Una vez más, silenciar el audio original. Y cuando han acabado, si aún no han actualizado Zoom, probablemente salga un botón que diga Listo, Done o Finalizar. Selecciónelo para de esa manera poder escuchar en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have a question or comment today, we will have a designated Q&A section at the end of the meeting. There will also be opportunity, if time permits, for live questions. But in the interim, for in-person attendees, there are comment cards provided near the front door right next to the sign-in sheet. You can provide those to us at any point during the meeting, and we will be sure to get back to you during the Q&A section. And if there is not time at the meeting to facilitate that conversation, we will get back to you separately. For virtual attendees, please feel free to use the chat box at any point during the meeting. We'll be cataloging all questions and comments and answering them live if time permits, or doing Q&A section. Again, if time does not permit to get to every question, we will include those in our responses to folks after the meeting.
Terrific. So with those administrative details out of the way, I want to again welcome everybody who's joining us. I am Matthew Phoenix. I'm an environmental economist who has a specialty in the design and implementation of water markets. And I am part of the Stantec consulting team that you'll learn a little bit more about as we recap previous public workshops. But the Stantec team was brought in to help facilitated stakeholder engagement process that has resulted in the water marketing strategy that we're going to cover today. I also want to introduce Kendrielle Clark.
Hi, I'm Kendrielle. I'm a public affairs and funding specialist with Stantec. We are serving as the facilitators for the water marketing strategy, and that includes the committee meetings that have occurred since 2021, I believe, and all of the workshops that have happened to date.
Awesome. So our goal for today is to provide a brief recap of the previous workshops. We really just want to remind you how we got here, what the process was that has produced the water marketing strategy that's being finalized for presentation to the 3 GSAs. After that recap, we really want to share with you the 2 major updates since the last public workshop. One is that we actually facilitated a pilot market, a test market that allowed us to implement version 1.0 of the water marketing strategy that the committee adopted, so that we could learn lessons, and make recommended changes to the strategy before finalization. And then we briefly want to walk you through the structure of the water marketing strategy document, which represents 3 years of work by the Water Marketing Strategy Committee. It represents the final strategy itself and all of the recommendations that it contains. So we'll walk through an outline of what that document looks like, and then also talk about how you can access and provide feedback on that final strategy, that draft final strategy document before it's truly final. All right, so that's the plan for the next hour or so of activity. So in terms of a previous workshop recap, the previous workshops dealt a lot with how this process started and then the early work of the strategy committee. And so this all begins with a Water Smart grant. And this is financial assistance that was secured by Tulare Irrigation District for the benefit of all 3 GSAs in the Kaweah Subbasin. And what that grant seeks to do is assist water managers in the Kaweah Subbasin on projects that help conserve and use water more efficiently, and specifically to investigate and develop water marketing strategies that implement a series of best practices, preventing water-related crises, and also accomplish a full range of benefits for all stakeholders in the basin. Now, the actual work that's being done under the grant is conducted by the Kaweah Subbasin Water Marketing Strategy Committee. And so you see here a list of committee members and the various stakeholders that they represent. The goal was to have a decision-making body that would represent all water users in the basin. And so you see who those members are here. And again, they have been engaged from the beginning, and you're going to see the results of their many, many hours of work. In terms of the scope of work, what is it that the committee seeks to accomplish? Its scope, first of all, included researching existing markets and strategies. So the goal of the committee was not to reinvent the wheel, to try something new in the Kaweah Subbasin that had never been done before. Quite the opposite. The goal was to just find out what's already being done and what works elsewhere, and then use that as a basis for designing a water marketing strategy that could be implemented in the Kaweah Subbasin. After researching markets, the goal was to develop specific terms, standards, market rules, and procedures that could be adopted and implemented as a version 1.0 of a Kaweah Subbasin water market. Now, you'll see this version 1.0 a few times throughout the presentation. One of the things that the committee realized right away, very early in the process, was that this was going to be new and that we would learn a lot throughout the process, and that actually we should start humbly, start simply, and that we should plan for a process that will change over time, right? So that the actual market structure, the market rules will adapt to new information becoming available through the use of the market, and also to changing conditions in the subbasin. After that, one of the elements of the scope was to analyze water rights, and within that understanding of water rights, to develop a legal framework through which the Kaweah Subbasin water marketing strategy could be implemented. Right? So this includes, first of all, developing an understanding of how market transfers of water credits actually impact water rights, and then what are all of the legal documents, what's the legal infrastructure required to enable a water market in the Kaweah Subbasin. The next element of the scope was to conduct a test of the version 1.0 market, to actually implement a test market for just a single water heater in order to start learning, how did things work? Did things work as we intended? Were there unintended consequences? Were there things we didn't think of during the design process as a committee? With the idea that then the findings and recommendations that came out of that full test of the market could be used to update the water marketing strategy before finalization. And then what the committee is now working to do is produce the draft final water marketing strategy document, which actually tells the story of this entire scope of work, the decisions that were made, the lessons learned, and so on. Now, in terms of existing markets, just to give you a sense of what some of the elements of that scope of work look like, This here, obviously, the font size is so small, you can't possibly see the information that's on this slide, but I just wanted to share with you that there were dozens of markets that were surveyed. We looked at those markets across a wide range of parameters, various market structures, availability of price information, how different basins implementing markets approach mitigation of adverse impacts, so on and so forth. And so we sort of created a menu of options that the group could then choose from. Now, in terms of making choices about specific rules, specific structures, the next step that the committee undertook was to agree to a set of guiding principles. We first asked the group, what is it that you hope to accomplish through the water marketing strategy? And very importantly, what is it that you hope to avoid as we engage in market transfers? And what you see here are those guiding principles which were presented in previous public workshops. And this really became the system that was applied to that menu of options. And with these guiding principles in place, the actual choices, various market structures over others, various rules over others was fairly straightforward. Getting unanimous approval for these guiding principles from all of the stakeholders represented in the Water Marketing Strategy Committee was actually the hard work that really gave the group a lot of momentum moving on. And so what this actual strategy looks like here is just a basic rundown of some of the basic elements. The version 1.0 Kaweah Subbasin Water Market imagines a water market which has a program period of the current water year. So the idea here is to suggest a water market that operates on an annual basis, which is approved for a single water year, and then actually requires evaluation of what happened, what worked, and what didn't, and then affirmative reauthorization, updating and reauthorization of the market rules and market structure following each year of trade, of the program period. The unit traded here is 1 acre-foot of allocation. In the Kaweah Subbasin, obviously, we're talking about allocation measured as evapotranspiration. And the type of allowable trades are one-time transfers of allocation. So that's to say, when someone sells an acre-foot of allocation, the person buying it only secures that acre-foot for the current water year. It's not a perpetual use of that acre-foot going forward. And as you're going to learn, there is a limit on the amount that an individual can sell. So there's a cap on how much that water users can sell. Again, in order to actually reduce the amount of transfers in the earliest years of the market, to sort of set a cap on how much can be traded to try and avoid large concentrations of pumping. It's also the case that cap up to 10 inches per acre on an APN within a GSA is chosen because that's the native yield designated within the allocation within each of the GSAs. And so that's to say, while there are different elements of an individual's GSA allocation, the one type of allocation that everyone has is native yield, and that's up to 10 inches. And so that's why the committee chose that initial cap on transfers. Eligible participants in this market are landowners within a given GSA, a GSA that authorizes the market, who hold allocation and are current with all GSA rules, regulations, and are current with all fees. The type of exchange that the committee is recommending is a series of monthly auctions to be conducted during the water year, as well as what's called a true-up auction 45 days after the end of the water year. Now, monthly auctions, they don't need to be any more frequently than monthly, because that's the frequency with which water use data is updated. The evapotranspiration data is updated in the water dashboard. And the vision for an auction 45 days after the end of the water year recognizes that water use data in the Kaweah subbasin arrives with at least a 30 to 45 day lag, and that it would be useful to do a single auction 45 days after the close of the water year, when the final water use measurements come in. And this allows water users to sort of true up their accounts before fees are due at the end of the water year. The committee is recommending an exchange that's facilitated by a third party, so a party outside of the GSA itself, and that the exchange platform be integrated into the water accounting dashboard that's currently in use in each of the 3 GSAs in the Kaweah subbasin. This is an anonymous market, so because of the third-party facilitation, it's possible for participants to participate in this market, sell allocation credits, buy groundwater credits, and do so without knowing the identities of the counterparties. And one last thing is that the idea in terms of this exchange is that there would be an abundance of information about the price and quantity of each transfer. So following each of these auctions, while the actual counterparties don't know the identities of who they bought or sold allocation with, that the number of transactions, the quantity and the price for every single one of those will be made public to water market participants, as well as to those who might be interested in market activity, so engaged stakeholders in the GSA. The mitigation of adverse impacts is a big part of the recommendations that you'll see here and the water market pilot that we presented. And so the water marketing strategy actually designates trading zones. So these were loosely based on the starting point for these trading zones was the analysis zones included in the groundwater sustainability plans in each of the GSAs. Those were modified so that that no boundary ran through the middle of a parcel. And this establishes trading zones where potential adverse impacts are monitored for, and there are specific rules to mitigate those. There are, in fact, 2 triggers. So within a trading zone, there's a minimum threshold trigger. So if water falls within a protective threshold of if water levels fall to within a protective threshold of the minimum threshold designated in the GSP, there would that trading zone will drop out of the broader market, and directional trading restrictions will apply. Specifically, if the minimum threshold trigger is hit, there cannot be transfers of additional pumping, net transfers of pumping into that trading zone. We can't concentrate even more pumping. However, parcels within that trading zone will be allowed to transfer allocation out in order to reduce the net pumping in that region. There's also a disadvantaged community trigger where the water levels near shallow municipal systems are mapped to the nearest representative monitoring point. And again, if water levels fall to within a protective threshold of those wells going dry, that there will actually be a restriction that results in no trading within that particular trading zone until the impact is mitigated. Just to give you a sense of what this looks like, this was covered in some detail in the previous public workshops, but you can see the map here that designates the trading zone. Just to give you a sense of how this works, if we zero in on this particular part of the Mid-kaweah GSA, if we're looking at trading zone 30, there's a representative monitoring point inside 30. And let's say that water levels fell to within a protective threshold of the minimum threshold, then that area 30 would be pulled out in the sense that there would be directional restrictions on trade. So without the trigger being hit, APNs inside ranches within trading zone 30 can trade with ranches in water users in trading zone 29. And so allocation can move back and forth between those trading zones. But if the trigger is hit, in the case of the minimum threshold trigger, pumping could be transferred out of 30 into 29 or 28, but allocation could not be transferred into 30 from those other areas.
Question.
To avoid concentrations of pumping.
Matthew.
Yeah, please.
So back to your slide.
Yeah.
When are you using that determination time-wise to determine the level? Because the level could be good in April.
Yep.
If you made the deal, and then if it's down in September.
Great question. So what the strategy currently imagines is that this will happen in the fall reading, and a decision will be made, either the trigger applies or it doesn't. And that's to say, if in the fall reading, that's about the same time that the GSA would be authorizing the next program period for the next year. And so then water users would know for that next 1-year program period whether or not the trigger applies. In the case of the disadvantaged community trigger, so first of all, in the case of the minimum threshold trigger, it could be updated. So if water levels come up at the spring reading, then those restrictions can be removed during the spring reading, affecting auctions later in the water year. In the case of the disadvantaged community trigger, it can be lifted anytime with board approval, as long as the impact to disadvantaged communities has been mitigated.
Which board?
The GSA board. So this is GSA specific.
Within whichever specific GSA the DAC is in.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, the strategy here envisions that so the idea here, one of the goals in those guiding principles was a single basin-wide system. So the idea was here to develop a strategy that could be implemented in each of the 3 GSAs. Some GSAs may choose not to. Mid-kaweah is already moving ahead with implementation. And so this is GSA specific. So it would be the individual GSA board that governs. All right, so that is sort of a review. There's much greater detail about those aspects of the water marketing strategy in the 3 previous workshops. Recordings of those workshops are available through Tulare Irrigation District's website. There's actually a water marketing strategy landing page on the Tulare Irrigation District website. So we encourage you to look for those recordings, reach out to us if you have additional questions. And obviously you're going to have a public comment period here where we also welcome additional suggestions and feedback related to any aspect of the water marketing strategy. So now moving on to what's new since the last public workshop is that we actually implemented a test market in the Mid-kaweah GSA. And so we wanted to sort of walk you through that entire process and what some of the findings and recommendations are resulting from that. So this is a basic timeline of what happened for the Mid-kaweah GSA pilot market. Again, this is implementing that version 1.0 of the strategy. And so the timeline was that we were really moving ahead beginning late last year on the implementation of a pilot market. From mid-December through the end of April, there was a process of systematically testing and evaluating the water dashboard. I'll give you some more details about what that involved, but looking at the actual accounting system and making sure that that was tested and that the data in the water dashboard could be relied upon for transfers of credits. Also, this involved integrating an exchange software platform into the water dashboard. That process went through the end of April, and on May 1st, we actually did a full test of the market using only Tulare Irrigation District accounts. And so what we have here was that Tulare Irrigation District had multiple water accounts in the water dashboard, and they were actually able to register for the exchange software and with both of those accounts. One of them submitted multiple bids, the other account submitted multiple offers, and we ran a full test of the auction trading platform, reporting of transfers, the use of the various legal documents that you'll learn about, and did that full market test. So having accomplished that full market test, we actually moved ahead shortly after that. The Mid-kaweah GSA passed a resolution authorizing a GSA-wide pilot market for the previous water year. And so here we are actually trading allocation from the 2022-23 water year that ended September 1st of 2023. And so the idea here was that these auctions, which were being conducted after the end of the water year, allowed water users to true up, either purchase additional allocation credits if they needed it to close their books for the previous year, or to accumulate some groundwater credits that could be carried over to future water years. And so we had a public workshop on May 16th, the first auction on May 24th. We'll share with you what the activity in that auction looked like. And then on May 30th, the GSA board approved the transfers that happened as a result of that first auction. We then did a second round of second auction. We had a public workshop on June 4th, followed by the second auction on June 14th. In this case, the next GSA board meeting wasn't for another month. And so it wasn't until July 9th that the GSA board approved the transfers from the second auction. Now, just to dive a little deeper into what the various elements of that pilot market looked like. In the pre-pilot phase, as I mentioned, there was extensive testing and validation of the water dashboard and integration of the exchange software. And so all of this is built around the water monitoring and accounting system built into the water dashboard. So obviously this is where water users within a GSA create an account. They can actually see the portfolio represented in their allocation, so they can see their allocation credits, any groundwater credits that they might have, other elements of the allocation. They can also see the status of their water use. And very, very importantly, this would allow an individual water user to see how much water they might have available for sale if they wanted to offer allocation in an auction for sale, or they can also gauge their need to purchase additional allocation. So during the testing and validation, this actually was this was a process that was a little longer and more difficult than we anticipated. There were some problems in the initial accounting system within the water dashboard. There were multiple APNs present in more than one water account. So there were multiple accounts having the same APN, resulting in double counting of allocation. There were accounts that had personal information that was either missing or it was there and later disappeared. There was some sort of accounting methods like the calculation of a user's balance. Balance was intended to be the difference between someone's supply and their water use, but actually balance was used twice to mean two different things and two different calculations. There were data standards and definitions that varied and changed over time between various elements within the water dashboard. Some things were measured in whole numbers, some were measured in infinitely long strings of decimal places. Some had a data standard like it rounded to 2. And so we went through a process of standardizing all of those definitions across various data points. Another challenge that we had was that, as covered in previous workshops, the Water Marketing Strategy Committee wanted individual market participants to make APN-specific choices about the sale of allocation credits or the purchase of credits. And that's to say the committee really wants to know on an APN-specific basis where credits are moving from and where they're moving to. And so the exchange platform requires a seller to submit an offer to sell that's tied to a specific APN. Market participants who want to purchase allocation actually have to submit a bid that is designated to a specific APN. When we first started, there actually was not any user interface in the water dashboard that allowed a grower to see an APN specific view of their credits, their usage, and their balance. So we actually had to build that system so that growers actually had access to APN level data on their own supply and water use. In terms of building the exchange software into that, this is a simple existing software package that just allows people to submit bids and offers. It allows them to see the status of their water use. It imposes the various water rules, such as restrictions on the amount that can be offered for sale. It also allows people to see the complete market history, all of the price and quantity information. And so that exchange software had to be connected to the water dashboard so that data could be exchanged back and forth between the two pieces of software. Available for trade, which is the cap on an individual's ability to sell allocation, that had to be created in the water dashboard and then transmitted to the exchange software. To facilitate that, a new trading module was built in the water dashboard. And then we did multiple rounds of tests to test the accounting system in the water dashboard to make sure that actually after transfers of allocation happened from one account holder to another, that those accounts all updated exactly as we expected them to do. And that actually took a number of rounds. So there was some incorrect accounting. Initially, the water dashboard was not perfectly implementing the allocation system in the Mid-kaweah GSA. And that incorrect implementation included things, as I already mentioned, like double counting, formulae that just didn't equate. 2 + 2 didn't equal 4. And so multiple rounds of testing identified and worked out those various accounting routines. So once that was all done and we did the full market test using Tulare Irrigation District accounts, we opened GSA-wide within the Mid-kaweah GSA. As I mentioned, there were public workshops on May 16th and June 14th. You see here a photo from the College of the Sequoias. And what this did is this was an opportunity to engage directly with not just potential market participants, but with any interested stakeholder in the Kaweah Subbasin who wanted to learn more. We provided an overview of the market rules, the market structure. We also worked directly with water users to make sure that they were registered for the water dashboard, to make sure that they understood how to use that, to register for the exchange software, and then to learn how to submit bids to purchase allocation or offers to sell allocation, how the auctions would be run, and how the transfers would be approved by the GSA. In terms of the two auctions that were facilitated, on May 24th, you can see that there were bids to purchase a total of 535 acre-feet of groundwater credits. So there were bids to purchase a total of 535. So this was multiple bids. The average price of those bids was $143 per acre foot. The highest bid was $250 per acre foot. There were offers to sell a total of 90 acre feet. So you'll notice obviously that the quantity offered for sale was lower. There's a couple of reasons to expect that. One of them is the cap. No one can offer more than 10 acre feet, 10 inches per acre on a given APN. But you can see there were offers to sell a total of 90 acre feet. The average price was $175 and the lowest offer was $175. So it actually happened that all of the offers to sell those 90 acre feet had the same price of $175. So we sold 90 acre feet. And the average price of those sales was $193.06 per acre foot. So we were able to move all 90 acre feet that were available for sale in that first auction. We did a second auction on June 14th. You'll see here that volumes of bids and offers did change quite a bit. So there were bids to purchase now only a total of 166 acre feet of groundwater credits. So a smaller volume of purchases or bids to purchase. And you can see that the average price was $131, which was down from $143. That's to be expected because the way the auctions are run is that the person who bids the highest, first person whose bid is matched, And so the person who bid 250 acre feet in the first auction was the very first bid that was matched. It's matched with the lowest offer. And so, of course, the price has a tendency to come down over time as you remove those higher bids in previous rounds of transfers. You can see the highest bid here was 251 per acre foot, and the average price did decline. There were offers to sell a total of 258 acre feet, so there was a significant increase in the quantity of acre feet available for sale, but you'll see the average price was $238. So that was substantially higher than the $175 average price. So there were quite a bit more offers to sell, but people really were not willing to sell at a very low price, right? You had to pay a substantial amount in order for them to part with their groundwater credits. And as a result of that sort of mismatch, bids to purchase that were very low price, offers to sell that were very high. We moved only a total of 8 acre feet, that particular auction, and that had an average price of $188 per acre foot. So when we put those two together, there were bids to purchase a total of 701 acre feet of groundwater credits. There were offers to sell 348 acre feet, a total of 98 acre feet sold, for an average price of $192.74. So there were 15 different bids total, and 6 different offers, and those were submitted by 11 different market participants. And so you'll notice here that most people submitted more than one bid or more than one offer, and that's very typical in other markets. So people were willing to sell, for example, a certain amount at one price, but to get them to sell additional units, they required a higher price. And the reverse was true for offers, for bids to purchase. And so you see here, current bid and offer prices and limited activity are what we expected. They were consistent with a relative abundance of supply in the 2022-2023 water year. So because of the relative abundance, there weren't people that really needed allocation in order to avoid paying penalties in the 2022 water year. So the willingness to pay was fairly low. Also, individual water users have the ability to carry over unused allocation. It generates a groundwater credit that can be carried and add to an individual's allocation in future years. And so the reservation price is pretty high. In order to forego those groundwater credits, people were requiring a fairly high price. And so that's actually what we expected. And in terms of what the committee discussed ahead of time, we actually were very pleased with the amount of activity that we had and the number of transfers. In fact, we remarked a number of times that if this had been the way the 2022-23 water year looked initially, early in the water year, that it was going to be a very, very dry year. We actually worried that trying to implement a market test when water users were in desperate need for additional allocation would have been very, very challenging. And so this gave us time to take the time to get the water accounting system right, to test and validate the water dashboard, and then work through what it was like to familiarize people with the market rules, get them registered for the water dashboard and the exchange software. And so as you'll see, it also produced a number of findings and insights that will inform the water strategy going forward. In terms of the post-pilot market process, we conducted a pilot market survey to try and collect feedback from market participants and stakeholders broadly. And so to describe the pilot market survey, I'm going to turn it over to Kendriel.
Thank you. So we submitted a survey for a few reasons. We had a lot of planning and collaboration and testing that went into this market, and we had a lot of ideas about how it would go naturally. But as you know, the closer you're looking at something, the less you see. So we wanted to understand whether or not our planning was sufficient in order to account for all of the needs of market participants. And we'd hoped that that planning would lead to a successful understanding of the upgraded software, of the market itself, of the auction process, And we hoped that all of the detail that we poured into the planning would help improve our perspective of how users would see the market and would allow us to help position them for success. That being said, there's always room for improvement. So we wanted to engage with people who had participated in the pilot market who weren't as close to the process as we were. They would, in all actuality, help us see any blind spots that we may have missed during the planning portion. So we used the survey as a way to validate all of the findings that we anticipated before implementing the pilot market. So we wanted to confirm assumptions, learn about the dashboard user experience, define areas for improvement, if any, and support the findings that we included in the strategy document. So to start out with how we did the survey, there was a picture. How was it sent out and distributed? Well, we wanted to remand it simply to just folks who were in MKGSA's, Mid-kaweah GSA's jurisdiction, even though there were a lot of folks across the subbasin who stayed in tune with the process since the beginning. So we sent the survey to existing water dashboard users, all of MKGSA's customers, and interested parties who were subscribed to their interested parties database. We sent several email communications to those groups of people through the interested parties databases specifically, and I think also directly to a few individuals over the course of a few weeks, specifically with the first communication going out on July 19th, and then several reminders coming all the way into the survey close on August 5th. We posted the survey to the MKGSA or the Tulare Irrigation District website on the webpage that Matthew mentioned, specific to the water marketing strategy, and also simply a lot of word of mouth, giving calls, emails, conversations in passing in hallways, just letting folks know that this was happening, preparing them for the pilot market, what to expect, and who to reach out to if they had any questions or comments. Getting into who participated in the survey, you'll see that the data here is not specifically reflective of the numbers that Matthew presented earlier, because not everybody who participated in the market also participated in the survey. So keep that in mind. So we wanted to know who took the survey. Where do they live? Where do they work? Where do they sit in relation to the Mid-kaweah GSA? And we found that overwhelmingly most of the survey respondents lived or worked in the Mid-kaweah subbasin, Mid-kaweah's jurisdiction. However, not everybody only lived or worked or had land in Mid-kaweah's jurisdiction. There were folks who had land or worked in or lived in Mid and Greater, Mid and East, Mid Greater and East, and then a few in just Greater or just East. This told us, number one, that survey respondents, for the most part, had some involvement with all three subbasins in one way or another. It also told us that this question should have been a check one box instead of check all of the apply, but we are working with that. And third, it told us that there are a significant number of folks who have a lot of different approaches to water management happening, all in their own ethers. So we need to continue having a great amount of information sharing and collaboration with the other GSAs to make sure that we're being as proactive and innovative as possible, so that folks don't get too confused working with water management in between subbasins. So what was the agricultural involvement of respondents? Overwhelmingly, folks not specifically remanded to each category, but at least in some capacity worked with tree crops, a small portion that matched pretty evenly with forage crops and row crops, with I think like a tenth or half of a tenth of a difference between forage and row crop. A very small portion worked with vines, similar big chunk with livestock, and a very small portion with nurseries and other types of agriculture. Of the people who responded to the survey, approximately 69% of those folks conducted on-farm recharge activities. The majority of the reasoning that they used for why they participated in on-farm groundwater recharge was to build credits as a long-term supply for business purposes. Second most answer was to build credits for business purposes and to sell on the water market. And then a smaller portion were for folks who wanted to use groundwater credits specifically for the market. This told us that more than half respondents significantly lend itself to the planning that we had undergone in the couple of years prior to this. One of the goals that we had before we set out with the pilot market was to make sure that this wasn't looked at as a similar model to the stock market. We wanted to make sure that folks understood that this was a tool to use to help manage water resources better, to help their neighbors, to ask for support, and not something to use as an economic generation tool. So who participated in the pilot market and why, or how they participated in the market? A lot of folks have been involved with this process, either directly or tangentially since the beginning. There was a lot of communication between MKGSA's water users, between the strategy committee and folks even outside of MKGSA's jurisdiction. A lot of folks overwhelmingly attended one or more of these public workshops or reviewed the recordings that we post on the Mid-kaweah or TID's YouTube channel. Second up, they reviewed a lot of the materials that we presented during the steering committee meetings. Those materials are also posted to the same webpage that we host all of the updated PowerPoints and agendas for the water market as a whole. They met with MKGSA staff, so folks like Diana here, who has been an integral part of this process, Aaron Fukuda, and the rest of MKGSA staff to learn more about the market and how they could participate. They even attended meetings themselves every so often. And we also like to thank the committee members who also talked a lot with their constituents, their neighbors, their friends, just telling people about the market in hopes that they could generate more interest. Now, getting into pilot market participation, we wanted to learn about what their survey responses meant. So first of all, as Matthew said, there was a significant amount of testing and validation trying to mesh the exchange software with the existing water dashboard. And we wanted to make sure that, number one, that the dashboard was still easy to navigate, and two, that the exchange software didn't present any issues. For the majority of respondents, there was no difficulty in navigating the upgraded software. A small portion of folks found that it was difficult, but in their comments did credit their lack of technical acumen to begin with for that reason, and not specifically because of the upgrades themselves, which is good to hear. As mentioned, there was an average of 98 acre feet sold at an average price of $192.74. As you may remember, Matthew said that there were 15 different bids and 6 different offers. This does not reflect that, as it only reflects people who participated in those bids and offers that also responded to the survey. So of those folks, there were 7 bids and 2 successful offers. This tracks what we saw in the market and what we understood the market to be prior to its implementation, with bids coming in a bit too low and reservation prices coming in a bit too high. For respondents who chose to specify whether they were surprised or not by the cost of buying and selling groundwater allocations, or by the success or lack thereof of their participation in that bid, almost none said that they were surprised by those prices, and they recognized that the bids were too low for a successful transaction. Most specified that they were trying to test the market, to test the software, just sort of play around with it and figure out how things worked. There were a couple of respondents who did say they didn't anticipate the prices being too high, but also that they hadn't been involved during the process this far. So maybe the entirety of the market was a bit of a surprise to them. Of the survey respondents, about approximately 48% didn't register for the pilot market at all. Some folks said that they weren't interested. Some didn't have any water to offer and didn't try to play with the market just as an experiment. Some said the timing didn't work. But for those folks, they were all aware of the market from its get-go and didn't have a lot of feedback to offer as far as how we could have improved noticing about the market, what we could have done to sway their thought process and whether or not they decided to participate. But they did overwhelmingly subscribe to the interested parties database and remained engaged through other communication channels. They attended meetings and workshops and reviewed materials. A small amount of the folks listed here did say that they found out through the market and may be fitting into the timing didn't work out or other category. They found out through industry associations and other organizations in their community, from farm managers, from nonprofit communications, and again, just word of mouth from friends, family, and neighbors. So of those 29 participants who engaged in the survey, there were 5 folks who did not have a pilot market account prior to this and specifically signed up because of the market. For 11 folks there were 11 folks who had chosen to register specifically for the market, 4 who declined to respond, and 14 who chose not to register at all, just to make a little bit of clarity about those percentages up there. Overall, this tells us that the committee's approach to developing the water market and how they implemented the pilot really aligned with the guiding principles that Matthew showed earlier and showed us that their dedication, the hundreds and hundreds of hours that they've poured into this, collaborating and deliberating over all of the technical information about the setup of the market has really paid off. And I think it's a wonder just how far we've been able to come with this and how successful that it's been. And finally, what does the future of the pilot market look like? A few folks said that they would participate in the market in the next 3 to 7 years as a buyer or seller. But the majority of respondents said they would participate as both, either as primarily a seller or primarily a buyer. So this shows that folks were either successful in their participation of the market or anticipate being a little bit more successful when a full-fledged market is underway and are looking forward to entering that again. And I think that's my last slide.
Awesome. So in the survey that was conducted, there were also some free response questions. And so again, this full survey results will be an exhibit in the in the final strategy document. And just to give you a sense of what some of those free response suggestions look like regarding the exchange software, there actually was a recommendation that the committee consider lifting the limitation on how much a person can offer for sale, that cap at 10 inches. There was a comment that the anonymity is really important, and also that water credits need to stay near the APN that they're sold from. There was one sort of functional piece of feedback, which was that a feature to print a PDF version of the user interface in the exchange software would be great. So after someone submits bids and offers, there's a detailed menu where they can see their outstanding offers. They can edit or delete those. They can, if they have bids, they can see outstanding bids and bids, edit or delete those. But there was a desire to print that out so that someone could have a hard copy if they wanted. Now, in terms of finding and recommendations, sort of what did we learn and how does this affect the water marketing strategy going forward? So here is a series of findings related to the market rules. One was that there's a significant delay between matching of bids and offers, so between the conducting of an auction and the approval of transfers by the GSA board. So as you saw in the timeline, in one case, we did an auction, and then it took more than a month for water market participants to learn that their transfers had been approved. And so one recommendation is that within a given year, as soon as an auction is conducted, approval could be automatic, and those transfers could simply be reported to the GSA board, conditional on all of the market rules being applied, the restrictions on trade, et cetera, the cap on the amount sold. And so that's one recommendation that came out of there. And that's how markets are conducted in other regions where that approval is more automatic following an individual auction. Another finding was that the limit on the quantity sold and not on the quantity purchased may reduce the incentive to conserve. By limiting how much a person can sell, it reduces the potential financial reward of conservation. And so a recommendation, as you saw in the free response, we heard this in public workshops as well, where people said, hey, that doesn't make any sense. You would be financially rewarding my conservation if you let me sell as much as I want. The recommendation when we took this back to the committee, though, was that we should continue with the current cap until more experience has been gained with the market transfer. So until we do, another full year-long test of the market or implement it, that's something we should leave till later, after we've had time to learn and uncover any potential unintended consequences of trades. Another finding was that there would be greater opportunities for transfers and more robust price discovery with transfers between GSAs. So there's a huge appetite, especially among those individuals that Candriel called out who have parcels in the Mid-kaweah GSA and in another GSA to be able to move allocation between those parcels and maybe even to sell to other water users in another GSA, especially where those other water users have parcels that are immediately adjacent to a GSA boundary. And so we heard that from stakeholders in a number of settings, share that with us. The recommendation of the committee was that, that's fine, but in order to do that, the committee should first finalize the strategy document and submit the package to the GSAs for approval. And if more than one GSA were to approve the strategy, they could then work on coordinating those transfers between GSAs. And so again, the current plan is to finalize the document and make it available for consideration by the various GSAs. In terms of the water dashboard, we actually learned that the testing and validation is critically important for any GSA planning to implement transfers, right? That the actual accounting routines are vitally important, and that there are a number of opportunities for double counting, miscounting, and that the process of validating that when someone believes they have a certain amount of water for transfer, they really have that water available, is really important. And so the recommendation here is that the final water marketing strategy should be updated to include testing and validation as an element of the strategy. And that it would even be a valuable recommendation that GSAs engage in that testing and validation, whether or not they adopt the market strategy. And there's also, just as an aside, a need for an administrator's dashboard. We learned that there's some functionality available in the Exchange software that's not available in the water dashboard. And it would be useful for the GSAs to actually have the ability to view all of the accounts registered within their jurisdiction and sort water dashboard account holders across any of the categories of information that are available. That there's not currently an administrator's user interface in the water dashboard. Another finding is that it was very difficult to implement the APN specific choice to buy or sell allocation in the water dashboard itself. That when someone put allocation available for sale in the water dashboard, that the water dashboard actually just assumed the person had sold it and it disappeared from their account, whereas some people submitted offers that were not successful, right? And it needed to go back into the account. So we ended up implementing that APN specific choice in the exchange software, which very quickly smoothed out any difficulties in the accounting. In terms of the exchange software, it's still the case, even after the validation and testing, the software integration that we did, that the accounting system used in the exchange software doesn't map perfectly to what's in the water dashboard. So for example, when someone logs into the exchange software, they can see the supply, which is the groundwater credits plus the allocation credits plus the precipitation credits that are available for each of their APNs. They can see their APN specific water use, and then they can see the balance, which is the difference. And they still can't see that same detail in the water dashboard. And so even though all of the data visible in the exchange software is data directly from the water dashboard, because it's presented in this unique APN specific view of supply, usage, and balance, and that same view is not available in the water dashboard. Sometimes water users were a little confused. Wait, are those numbers the same? And so there may be a recommendation is to add that same APN specific view of a user's account in the water dashboard interface. And then the last one is that these public workshops, we really learned that every opportunity to interact directly with water users in the GSA's jurisdiction was really, really valuable. This was everything from Mid-kaweah GSA and TID staff, having people come into the office to work with them one-on-one, the public workshops that we did, which were well attended and proved very, very useful. They were valuable, getting people familiar with the water dashboard if they weren't, getting them registered for the market, and then again getting to play around and learn how the actual auctions would be conducted. They could submit bids, edit bids, delete bids, submit offers, and sort of do a dry run with the input from the exchange administrator and from Mid-kaweah GSA staff. And that was really, really valuable. And so recommendation is to identify more opportunities to do that stakeholder outreach and maybe related. Maybe there's avenues of stakeholder outreach that we haven't exploited that we could in the future. So that was very, very valuable. And I think you see it's that work that's really represented in the survey responses where people said, no, this thing was straightforward and easy to use. I understood how it worked. I was comfortable with how this worked. And I think that was largely the result of that outreach. So you just can't do enough. So now in terms of the post-pilot timeline, what's next is we are wrapping up a draft final version of the strategy document. It will walk all the way through. I'm going to show you an outline here momentarily of what that looks like, but it will walk through all of the work, the entire scope of work conducted by the strategy committee, including the test market and the recommendations and findings and recommendations that resulted from that. That document will be available by the end of September on the, I don't know why that says KWM. It's the Kaweah Subbasin Water Marketing Strategy website. I'll show you a link so you know exactly where to find that in a moment. There will then be a public comment period that runs through October 31st. We'll let you know how to submit public feedback in a moment. And then during October and November, the committee will be cataloging and responding to that public feedback to produce a final strategy document. In terms of what that document looks like, so first you can go here. This is the Tulare Irrigation District website. So this is tulareid.org. You see under the Tulare ID logo, there is that menu of different pages, and you can see one that says Kaweah Subbasin Water Marketing Strategy Committee. If you click on that, it takes you to this homepage, which is the Kaweah Subbasin Water Marketing Strategy homepage. And it is here that you will find the full strategy document by the end of September. You can download that. You can mark it up by pen, scan it, return it to the email that you see there, to Diana Zagara at Tulare ID. You can mark it up in track changes in Microsoft Word if you like. You can simply submit email, just written comments. It doesn't have to even be embedded in the document itself. So we're open to feedback by whatever channel is easiest for you to provide feedback on any element of that strategy document. So that will close October 31st. Now, in terms of what that document looks like, and so you can see here all of the various elements. So there's basic information about the strategy document, the background about how we got here, what the Water Smart Grant is, what the structure of the strategy committee is, who the decision makers were. And so you'll see that represented in the introduction. There's some basic information. We understand that this will be read by stakeholders in the basin who were not intimately involved in the strategy development process. And so there's just real basic information about what is a water market, what is a groundwater market, how do they work, what are the potential benefits, and what are some of the potential pitfalls of markets. You'll see a summary of the Kaweah Subbasin's water budget and allocation system. In fact, there's something called the allocation matrix, a side-by-side comparison of the allocation systems in each of the 3 GSAs, because there are some differences in the allocation system between the 3. You'll also see a mapping of those trading zones that I showed you earlier. And there's even a link to an interactive GIS map online where you can zero in and you can actually see very specifically APN by APN where the location of those trading zone boundaries are. There's a chapter on analyzing water rights. So this encapsulates the committee's understanding of California water law and case law and what that background is to the water market that's being built. There's information there about SGMA and about the Kaweah Subbasin Water Accounting Framework. And then there's also some discussion of the allocation systems within the context of that broader water rights chapter. There's a very detailed chapter on existing water markets and strategies. So this is the research that the committee did, trying to learn as much as it could about dozens of markets that were being implemented throughout the Western United States and other parts of the world. So you can see their catalog of where those evaluated water markets are, and then categorically a list of different strategies, structures, rules, operating mechanisms, and how those various evaluated markets approach each of those. So there's both a narrative portion, there's also a measle chart that represents all that in tabular formation. And then there's a chapter called Building a Water Market. And so this is, first of all, the terms, standards, rules, and procedures in detail that the Water Marketing Strategy Committee decided on. There is the full legal framework for a GSA that a GSA can use to implement the water marketing strategy. This means an allocation transfer form that water market participants or water users generally, that allocation transfer form actually came out, I believe, out of East Kaweah, but it was generalized for the application of this water marketing strategy. So it can be used by market participants or just by any other water user. There's a resolution adopting the water market that a GSA could use as the basis for authoring its own resolution. There's, again, the detailed rules and procedures. There's a participation agreement, a legal document that a market participant signs as a condition of participating in the auctions. They agree to abide by the rules. They agree to behave in a certain way. And then there's also an exchange administrator agreement that could be used as the basis for a GSA to enter into an agreement with any third-party administrator that they might select to operate their exchange platform. There's also a full chapter, providing the information that you saw here in even greater detail about the test of the market that was conducted, that full pre-launch process, what happened, what we discovered. There's a detailed list of the market activity that you saw, a brief summary of here, and also details about that post-launch process, the full market survey, findings and recommendations, and then the updated terms, standards, rules, and procedures that resulted. And so there's also, after this, there's a chapter that has various reference materials and exhibits. And so there is, this isn't the last chapter, but this is the last sort of substantive chapter that I wanted to share with you tonight. And so there will be a full document with each of these chapters posted for the Tulare Irrigation District website by the end of the month. And we look forward to getting your feedback on any element of that that you choose to weigh in on. And again, that we will be spending October and November cataloging and incorporating that feedback into the final strategy document. And so with that, that concludes the formal part of this presentation. And we have a few minutes left here in our hosts space. We're here at Self-Help Enterprises in Visalia, and I want to thank you very much for the use of this incredible space, for hosting us for the workshop. And so with that, I want to just learn if there's comments or questions that anyone listening has that they'd like to offer.
Sure. So you're going in front of the board to basically ratify the exchanges. Is there any reason the board would not ratify your sales that have taken place if they've met all the criteria? There's in the dashboard.
Great question. There's not, and that's why afterward we thought, well, that month-long delay,
Just a rubber stamp.
it's a rubber stamp, right? And in fact, that's absolutely what it is. And in fact, the information upon which the decision to approve or not approve was based on agency staff recommendation, which means, well, the agency staff had made their recommendation a whole month earlier, right? So that was one thought, was that could just be made more routine. And again, if one thing you're concerned about is that all of a sudden things start happening you never intended, and this thing starts to run off the rails. But with this idea of only authorizing the market for a single year, there's only going to be a handful of auctions. It can't run too far off the rails, even with that automatic approval, because it stops at the end of the water year. You have to evaluate and reauthorize.
Within your pilot program here, do you have a feel for any transfers or sale of credits that were done outside of your framework here?
No. And in fact, the way the rules are implemented, the exchange software and the Water County dashboard actually don't. That's what's interesting, is that you cannot submit an offer to sell more than 10 inches, for example.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that outside of your water market here, did you have any transfer or sale of credits or allocation outside of this?
So this is done in Mid-kaweah, and Mid-kaweah does not. So the pilot was only run in Mid-kaweah. Mid-kaweah does not allow transfers outside of this structure. My understanding is there are transfers.
So you didn't have anything that came through your dashboard as
No, we
any
don't have
party to party.
right. We don't have a piece of a form that says that two people can come to us and do that. This was the only mechanism we had.
Whereas in East and Greater, there are systems for transferring.
Yeah. So I'm in East Kaweah.
Yeah.
And Mid has you're pretty uniform as far as a lot of your area there. We're not. Our allocation is native only.
Right. It's much smaller. Yep.
It's much smaller. It's as small as it gets.
Yep.
Other than zero.
Yes.
That's the next one. So we have these areas of depression, and there are areas of depression all along. So,
yep.
The whole concept is great, but as far as being able to move some water out of some of those areas,
yeah.
It's fine if you're selling credits outside of a depression, but if you're in one of those zones of depression, the last thing you want to do is pump more water out of there.
Right.
That's going to be, having these zones of management areas is something, we've talked about for a long time, but there's too many other
yep.
big ticket items that have taken
advantage.
Right. But that's going to be something that I think is going to be absolutely critical,
yep.
at least for us,
yep.
not for.
Yep. And so what you will see here is that in the strategy document, it actually will it will propose specific trading zone boundaries. The GSA doesn't have to implement them, but the engineering team actually worked up a map and they had a rule snapping trading zone boundaries to APN boundaries. And so an APN is always in only one trading zone. And so there is a proposal there and a proposal for how those trading restrictions would work. So for example, if you're in a pumping trough, this strategy actually does anticipate you could still trade with you could trade with your neighbor. right? You could still, your neighbor next door could still buy your allocation and increase pumping if they're in the same trading zone as you are. But you could not, but you can't buy it from outside the trading zone.
Right.
So you will see a full proposal that, and obviously what's nice about this is not, the committee doesn't anticipate this is like a take it or leave it proposition. You know, that Visalia might look at this and say, hey, you know, that's going to have to change. You know, that there's a proposal there, but it's going to need to be tweaked, right? And so I think the committee anticipates that there should be a process like that of evaluation by the individual GSAs.
Yeah, I was gonna say the trading zones here were it was done by Montgomery Associates, which is Mid-kaweah's
Right.
consultant, but it was approved by all three of the technical teams.
Yeah.
But for those depression areas, you know, for if Visalia wanted to get into the, you know, the water marketing strategy, they may come up with something smaller to kind of follow the depressions and areas that plump up more and things like that. These are the trading zones in the GSPs.
And also too, you mentioned that the allocation is minimal. It's just 10 inches. That's actually why we set the cap at 10.
I figured that.
Yeah, because we understand there's some people that's all they have.
Yeah, it's really tough for us to build up our, you know, our groundwater level as far as, because all the water flows through us and all those lower depressions. And so it's really tough for east to basically get any recovery.
And you're at the top of the gradient, right? Your water's flowing to everybody else. Yeah.
That's right. It just goes right through us.
Right.
Out to the other end of the west border of the Visalia. It's pretty darn tough.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments,
Yeah.
maybe from folks online?
Yeah, we've got about 3 minutes left if people have additional comments or questions.
Once, going twice.
All right, so you did see Diana Zagara's email up there, dnz@tulare.id. You're very welcome to send follow-up questions for any of us, for any member of the Stantec team, or for Diana. She can relay that information to us. And so we do look forward to hearing from you between now and October 31st. And thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks all.